let's get started. So thank you so much for joining everyone for our first SharePoint Benchmarking Report briefing session. So we're so excited to share the report and the findings from today, exactly on how people are using intranets and accessing them. It's just a great opportunity for you guys to meet with Sharon Dawson, the co-author of the report, as well as our wonderful thought leaders that are joining us on today's session. Usually for this session, if you'd like to jump in the chat, ask some questions, if you want to come off mute, raise your hand, we'd love for you to do that. Any questions, comments, we'd love for you to be interactive throughout. We can start now. If everyone would like to introduce themselves in the chat with name and where you're from, everyone get to know each other in that chat session, that'd be great. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this online session is hosted and the traditional custodians of the land where participants are located. I am in Adelaide, so I'd like to acknowledge the Kaurna people. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging as well. So we have a jam-packed agenda for you today. We'll be diving into exactly how intranets are used and understanding the purpose of intranets. Of course, we'll go over the key findings of the 2023 SharePoint Benchmarking Report with the help of our two lovely guests. We will also be doing a live demo of SWOOP for SharePoint, which will be fantastic, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A. We'll also have poll questions throughout, so we'd love for you to get involved with that. It'll pop up on your screen, so you'll have to get involved. So we'd love to see your responses for that as well. So I'll get started with introducing everyone. I'm Francesca. I know you're normally used to seeing Emily here, but she's off traveling Europe, so I'm filling her position for this one. I'll be your host for today, and I'm joined by fellow swoopers Matt Dodd and Sharon Dawson, who will be leading this session, which will be fantastic. Thank you, Sharon. And we are very lucky to be joined by Rebecca Rodgers and James Robertson from Step 2. They feature in the report and will be leading some discussion today with some incredible insights. We are so lucky to have them here. So without further ado, maybe I'll hand over to Sharon to kick us off.
Thanks so much, Fran. So as Fran said, please just jump in and ask questions anytime. We're here to answer your questions, and we've got some amazing thought leaders on the call as well. So just either in the chat, the Q&A, or just jump in and ask a question anytime. So this is our first ever SharePoint Intranet Benchmarking Report, and we ended up looking at analysing over 36,000 intranet pages, and it was accessed by almost 100,000 employees. So it was actually only 7 organisations that we benchmarked for our first report. And while 7 may not sound like a lot, we found in all our years of benchmarking millions of interactions across hundreds of organisations worldwide in our Viva Engage, formerly Yammer, M365, Microsoft Teams and Workplace from Meta benchmarking, that the biggest sample, it only marginally changes the major conclusions. So we're pretty confident that the findings from this report will stand. Having said that, we're doing a bigger report for SharePoint Intranet Benchmarking in May next year. And if you aren't using SWOOP for SharePoint, we'd love you to trial it, and you will anonymously be included in our benchmarking, which will come up in May. Fran, thank you. She's just shared the link for everybody there to see. And so we're hoping that we're getting closer to 20 organisations for the May report, which will be an update of this one. So we're going to kick things off by asking you a question to get you thinking about how the data we're about to share with you can be used to improve your own intranet. So Fran, can you launch this poll? It's a really simple one, and it's a word cloud. So just if you can pop in a word, we're going to ask you, here it is. What's the primary use for your intranet? What do you use it for? So is it for, internal comms? Is it to share news across your organisation? Is it just for HR, timesheets, those sorts of things? A couple of answers are coming in. Corporate storytelling, I love that one. Knowledge, operational. A business tool, sharing news, productivity. Source of truth, I like that one. I think looking at these answers, I think you're going to be really impressed with these findings, and we'll hopefully you'll be able to use this data to improve your intranet. There's some great answers coming in there. So Matt, I'm just going to hand over to you to talk about this bit and about the purpose of intranet and what we found in our benchmarking. And we're going to call on James and Rebecca from step 2 to also share their insights.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I'm the product director at SWOOP, formerly a intranet manager for a long time at various companies. And what we found with the benchmarking, we started to look at the different sorts of content within all of the intranets, and we were looking for a pattern. But as you can see from the graph, there wasn't really a pattern. And I think that really echoes what we've just seen on that word cloud, is that the purpose of the intranet is really mixed. And I think unless we can unless we can understand the context of the companies and what they're trying to achieve, the pattern is always going to be pretty broken. And I think, James, when we were chatting previously, you said you've certainly seen that there's a real mix of purposes for intranets.
Yeah, I mean, look, we did some simple surveying right at the beginning of things in the early 2000s, and we looked at sort of 3 things: size of the organization, size of the intranet, and the level of usage. And our results looked pretty much like this graph, which is, it's all over the place. And I guess that reflects the fact that intranets can play many, many roles. I mean, they can be a repository for frontline knowledge used by call center people every few minutes, or they could be that global corporate thing with the blah blah that kind of nobody goes to because you're going to something else, right? And they're both valid roles of an intranet, but you would see very different patterns coming out of that. So I'm not surprised by this at all, and I think it'll stay like this as you grow the size of the survey.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the important thing, for me, the takeaway is around making sure that organizationally you do understand what purpose it is, and making sure that you're clear on that context, rather than necessarily letting it just organically be there. I've seen intranets that have just been, they're put up, someone thinks it's a good idea, and there's not that structure or that actual real clear purpose behind them. And I think that also then helps because it allows you to plan out the strategy and the governance and the different things that you're going to need based off that purpose. But yeah, it was interesting to see that it was very contextual. There was no set pattern. So an interesting one for us. But if we move on to the next one, we were looking really at how many people are actually accessing the intranet. So out of all the people that have Microsoft accounts in organizations, what level of people are actually coming through, accessing the intranet, taking a look at what's happening. And it was, we range from about 65 up to about 95% of people in different organizations were accessing the intranet. And I think there's a few factors that come in behind that. Certainly, we've got some organizations that the intranet is their default browser window. So if you're going anywhere on the internet at all, you're going to view at least the homepage. But we do have others that don't have that facility. So getting that sort of high numbers up into the 60s, 70% without having it sort of forced on people, I think starts to show the value that people do put behind the intranets. But interestingly, we saw for the sort of readership of news items, that was substantially lower. So that's why we've suggested a target, 90% for the main intranet and about 40% as a good starting point for news. But I do think we want to sort of get a bit more into news. So I don't know whether Rebecca and James, if you've got thoughts on forcing people to look at your intranet or how that's panned out with some people, but I think it's a good start, right? It gets in front of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the early days, we were slightly hesitant about, sort of automatically opening the intranet, kind of thinking that, well, it's kind of passive aggressive, isn't it? But that being said, over the last couple of decades, look, people are fine with it, is what we've seen. I mean, it isn't a drama. It does kind of artificially inflate the usage statistics in some respects. So obviously, what's the usage of the rest of the site beyond the homepage? But if the intranet is supposed to be the primary channel for comms, then we do need people looking at it, right? So I think that auto loading thing is a kind of table stakes.
Yeah. And I can see, Rebecca, you put that comment in there about, yes, you wouldn't force people to the intranet experience, says they'll go there if it's useful. And I think that's again, an underlying theme that comes through. And if we move on to that sort of next slide, people are returning to the intranet. So even, okay, there is this element of maybe forced people within that set, but there was definitely a strong, people were going back pretty much every day, which I think is a great and worthy goal to reach. And I think it talks to the fact, and James used some of this up when we were speaking around some of the findings around the target should be to increase the value of the intranet rather than the use. And I think, that returning employee is really important in that space.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've said for a long time, intranets are used if they're useful. So the focus obviously needs to be on the useful bit. Intranets aren't owed a living. I mean, the goal should never be to increase intranet usage because by one measure, that's increasing wasted time, as others outside our space would consider, not that we would think that intranet usage is a waste. And so I guess it's really about saying, what's the purpose of the intranet, going back to that sort of position a couple of slides ago and saying, well, if you are communicating, for example, need to know news versus nice to know, then you need the level of usage pretty high, right? Because otherwise people are going to miss a whole pile of need to know stuff. Whereas if the intranet is more that culture piece, then maybe dipping in and out is fine.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I say all of this does keep echoing back to that purpose piece. And I think what we can do with some of the things we found, and we'll get on to some of the findings in a minute, we'll take a look, Sharon, in a second, is how we can find, what is that sweet spot for things like news and how we can encourage that. And if anyone's seen me talk before, whenever I talk about intranets, I've always got that mantra of, useful and usable as well as used, because you have to give that value as much as the adoption. So if we hand on to we're
going to head to a poll first. Oh, You've given it away, Fran. We missed the poll. Quick, take it off. Go to our poll.
Bring it into that.
How sharp are people?
Yeah, so a lot of these findings, as Matt said, we're hoping that the findings can help you make the intranet more useful, usable and used. Do you want to launch this poll, Fran? We're going to ask you, when do you think is the best day to publish on your intranet? Forget you saw the slide that Fran just shared. The results, here they are. Lots of Monday. Yeah, the Monday one's really interesting because what we ended up doing actually, as these results come in, I'll just tell you, because we only had the 7 organisations, as we said, even though it was more than 36,000 intranet pages, we also wanted to go out to thought leaders and intranet specialists around the world, and that's why James and Rebecca contributed to our report, and we shared all our findings with them just to get their insights. And when we did get their insights and we were asking them about the most popular times, a lot of them did say Monday, because apparently there's a lot of email data that shows that Sunday night or Monday morning, sending company emails, it's the best time for people to read them. However, we'll switch over now. It's not the case with intranets, we found. but it's really marginal, to be honest. So we found Thursday was the best day of the week. One of our thought leaders thought that maybe Thursday could be explained because a lot of people are doing hybrid work now, and they're in the office from Monday to Thursday. So as they leave the office on a Thursday before working at home on a Friday, they might be looking at the intranet. But it was, at the end of the day, it was only marginal. But interestingly, Thursday was the best day. So the key is the most popular times for reading the intranet, though, is between 7 and 9 in the morning or 11 and 1 at a weekday. So obviously as people log on in the mornings and during their lunchtime. But overall, we've found that news is being consumed anytime during the normal working hours between about 8 and 6 p.m. So with this in mind as to when people are reading news, we wanted to put the question is, when's the best time for you to publish the news on the intranet? So that's when we went out to our intranet specialists, and the general consensus was to prioritise content that should have the most attention in the beginning of the week, which goes back to that Monday. Even though people aren't reading it so much, the consensus was still publish earlier in the week, just so you don't miss that weekend when people aren't on the intranet. So Rebecca, I'm going to go over to you because we featured you in one of the articles in the release, and I was knowing you were saying it was really important to understand the target audience for your message and to schedule intranet posts when that audience is most likely to read it. So can you expand on a little bit about and some advice as to when you should publish?
Yeah, of course. Thanks very much, Sharon. So for me, it should be influenced both on audience, the type of audience, but also the industry that you're in. So we've seen things like, say, banks for frontline staff. The key time was just after 10 past 8 in the morning, which was when those the tellers were standing outside the bank doors waiting to be let in. That was when they were actually checking their messages. Versus a not-for-profit that we did some work with. For them, it was towards the end of their break time or the end of their shift when they were just catching up on things because they're mostly client-facing. So I think it really needs to look at whether they're office, frontline, field type staff, but also more broadly than that, the actual message that you're trying to get across, and the right delivery method for that. So is it more corporate facing news, or is it something more urgent, and time should factor into all of those, but it's more than just time for us.
Yeah, and actually you hit on something there, Rebecca. That was the other thing is, while it might be great to publish earlier in the week, if it's time sensitive, get it out straight away, whether that's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday even. Yeah. So if we just go to the next slide, these are some graphs that are in the report. So it just goes into a little bit more detail as to when people are reading news by the hour, you'll see there. And you can see on that second graph, the Thursday, you can see it's only marginally more readership on that day than any of the others. In fact, Friday looks like it's the lowest there, which is interesting. So we've got another poll to launch before we head to the next slide, and this one is about how much time do you think people spend on the intranet per day on average?
Well,
so you might want to put down, whatever, 5 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever you think. We've got 10 minutes, an hour. An hour a day. Wow, that's 5 hours a week. 20 minutes. Yeah, 75 minutes. Wow, interesting. A second. It's interesting someone mentions a second, because part of it we saw is people who accidentally land on the intranet and don't mean to be there. Oh, some interesting answers there. So, Fran, we might hit the slide And we'll tell you the answer. So the answer is 17 minutes a day on average. So we found that the visiting time ranged from a low of 11 minutes to a high of 22 minutes per workday per employee. Don't know if anyone, well, actually it doesn't, you might be surprised by that given those answers that were coming in there. So then we also found that the average time spent reading news ranged between 4 and 16 minutes. So with that, you can expect to have a window of about 10 minutes a day to grab employees' attention on news items. So this is where we went out to our internet specialist and we asked, how can you capitalise on that small window of time employees spend on the intranet, just to get your eyes on the key messaging? So the advice overall was to make sure that the intranet works, that employees can easily navigate the intranet, and content needs to be written in a way and presented in a way that's easily digestible. So James, I know in our report we featured you quite a bit on this topic, and I know you were saying that the focus should not be about how much time people spend on the intranet, but how useful it is. Now you touched on this earlier, but I think you were talking more about the user experience and how that can be really key to a successful intranet and getting eyes on news. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, I mean, look, clearly, if you've got limited time and life is busy for everyone, then you do want to have a clear strategy for the role of the intranet, including sitting alongside a clear internal comms strategy, because the intranet will only ever be one channel of communications. It's not going to be the one and only channel. So just therefore understand, what messages to push to the intranet in light of the likely amount of time that people are going to spend. And then, as you say, I mean, there are some fundamentals of usability to address on the site, and if those 10 minutes are spent fruitlessly flailing around not finding things, then this is not great. Noting that the more you improve the usability of the intranet, then the lower the amount of time will be spent on the intranet potentially. And so there's this interesting sort of to and fro about, do we want to increase or decrease the amount of time spent on the intranet? But either way, we definitely want to make sure we're delivering value and that people can use the site effectively within the scope of that broader strategy.
Rebecca, you look like you were going to add to that. Did you have something to add?
Oh, no, sorry. I was just responding to a message in the chat.
I'll jump in and answer. I think it is interesting with the idea that historically a lot of external website metrics and reporting is what's been carried over to the intranet. And I think the problem with that is it can reinforce the wrong thing. As James hinted, actually less time on page is potentially a good thing. The aim isn't to get people, embedded on your site, working through all this content, because you're not selling, product. You're giving people information. So you can get trapped into the wrong metrics, I think, sometimes, just because it's what's available and it's what's kind of commonly put out there. It's because people see it as, it's an internal website, we're going to bring all these website statistics over, and actually it's not necessarily the right thing.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that a little bit more with some more findings. I'm going to just jump to the next quick poll, and this one is about how long you think an intranet news article should be, or what's the the optimum length for an intranet news article. So this would be interesting. We did run this poll on LinkedIn a little while back, and it was interesting to see what's coming in. So a lot saying 300 words, 500 words is winning. 1,500 words. It depends on the topic and the style of the article. Yep, absolutely, Beck. Well, Fran, let's go to the slide. We've got a general consensus. So you guys got it right, 500 words or more. So that's the sweet spot for the length of an intranet news article. And it turns out that the longer the article, better than shorter articles, which we were really surprised about. Oh, sorry, just going in there. So we've wondered why is longer better, and most of the experts seem to think that 300-word articles, they looked more like social media posts, while articles of about 500 to 1,000 words actually had relevant content for employees to consume. And it was always the what's in it for me sort of articles that got the most attention. And also I think one of our intranet specialists was saying that around that 1,500 words is about 2 minutes for an adult to read, which again, when you're taking a break and looking at the intranet, it was about the right length as well. So that was quite interesting. We're going to move to the next slide now, and this one's about how long do intranet news articles sustain reader interest. And we found it's about a week before news starts to decay. And so before news becomes old news. So the question, I think, for a lot of you guys is, what do you do with this old news? So most of the specialists that we spoke to, they suggest archiving old news after about 12 months. Otherwise, it just keeps appearing in searches, and chances are people will come across outdated information. So the most important thing they said is to remember that searchable old news needs to be updated if information has changed, or you mark it as being old and outdated news. But James and Rebecca, can I hand over to you, because I know you've got some really good tips about, just archiving news when news becomes old news, and just, not searching and getting outdated news.
I mean, yeah, look, I think one of the things that we see across organizations is that there isn't a clear distinction made between content and comms. So, comms should be a message at a notification at a point in time that's relevant at that point in time. But in many organizations, the actual content is put in the news item. So it's not just, hey, there is a new policy, here's the new policy. And that's a massive issue, because that means that if you want to know the policy and stuff, the content, the policy page hasn't been properly updated. You have to find these increasingly older and older and older news items, which may have been supplanted by ones that are deltas to the previous ones. And particularly in frontline environments, this is diabolical. So there is a piece of work around comm strategy, just to really make sure that those notification messages that say, hey, here's a sentence or two, and points to the updated policy. And that way, the old news items aren't such an issue, but you definitely don't want to keep them floating around. And I think the other aspect of this is, we talk about designing intranets for sustainability. And one of the most obvious places around that is the design of the homepage and how much space you allocate for news. Now, if you've allocated 3 spots and you post an average of 2 items a day, then within a day and a half, your item is whipped past. Flip side, you allocate all this space, and you do news on once a month, and starts to look pretty dated. So it is about saying, how do we think we're going to be using the intranet as a comms channel? And then let's design it so that it has appropriate visibility, and that we don't have to worry so much about how quickly stuff whips past, because we've designed things like the homepage appropriately. But I think, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say,
sorry?
plugging SWOOP, this is where analytics tools like SWOOP for SharePoint really can help you identify those pages quickly and answer a lot of those questions,
and I think
or avoid a lot of problems.
Yeah, look, and I think one of the good things about the analysis that you guys have done is that you have differentiated between content and news items. And that in itself is a helpful thing. And you have treated them differently, which they should be. I mean, the analytics for each should be handled quite differently. So I think that's really a great thing that you guys have done in this space.
Thank you. We'll just move to the next slide, Fran. And this one's about, quality content builds confidence. So what we found is a beautifully designed intranet page. It looks great, but the reality is it's pretty useless, and it's a time waster for employees. They're wasting time trying to find what they're looking for. So if it doesn't clearly provide the information employees are looking for, you've got to question the value of it. So for an intranet to be successful, and by successful I mean to work for employees, pages need to be up to date. They need to be easy to use and capable of driving an action. I think is a big key, which we'll touch on in a second. So we found the quality of intranet pages correlates with the number of visitors coming to the page, and the higher the quality of the page, the more visitors came. So both contents and news pages with custom content, we found attracted 4 times as many visits as pages using already existing or compiled content. So just that was like just bringing over links and things, didn't get much engagement, but if there was content that then included all those new links, that had 4 times as many views. So we also found content pages, things like was that a question, or is it? I don't think so. We found content pages like HR, leave applications, travel expenses, as opposed to the news pages, get 3 times more visits. So Matt and James and Rebecca, I'm going to hand over to you to just deep dive into this a little bit more.
Well, I'll kick up. I think, yeah, this whole thing, I think, is almost the currency you've got in an organisation is trust. And I think the whole thing, it relates to what James was saying about the sort of news items and things getting out of date. If you come into an organisation and you see that an item, a page is 6 months, 9 months, 12 months old, you've got little confidence or trust that that is accurate. It might well be within your standards, it might well be the thing that is up to date, but people at that point are always going to sort of ask someone else, is this current, is this right? So I think there's a definite need to make sure that we're clearly showing that content is up to date and clear to users that it is, because that helps avoid all of those sort of sticky questions. That was something that I've certainly seen, and it also relates to the other thing that always triggers with me with this, and the sort of visually appealing. Certainly when I was an intranet manager, I got asked many times to jazz a page up, and the desire of different areas of the business to seem to be different. We want to be different. We want to, we want to look different. We want to feel different. And you have to always explain, well, yeah, but then you break everybody's mental model of how the intranet works. So they're going to struggle to use the page, and it's going to have an impact. So I think those 2 things, that's why I think the quality is so important. But I'll open to James and Rebecca. I'm sure there's a lot more things in there.
I mean, I guess we will probably say that all of that's kind of a statement of the obvious, right? That, we should have pages that are better written and more up to date. I mean, so this is not telling us anything we didn't know before. Good to see stats. So, I mean, the real conversation, is hinted at by the title of this session, which is, okay, so how do you manage the intranet in a way that delivers this? Because for most people, authoring is a hobby. It's done, it's tacked onto existing job roles. It's not in people's position descriptions. And we've said for a long time, you can't have amateur authors and expect professional outcomes. And at the end of the day, you get the right content when the right people are publishing the right things. But it turns out all those are people issues.
Yes.
And so, there's a real challenge around, how do we put in place the support structures for authors? Like, we're great fans of establishing a community of practice for intranet authors and helping to foster those shared skills. But at the end of the day, there's not enough time allocated in people's jobs to the intranet, and that's not the fault of the individual. And I think there's a danger that in kind of flagging stuff as being poorly written or out of date, kind of bashes the people who have been trying their best, right? It's not their fault It's the organisations for not giving them training and not allocating time. And so I think that's where we really want to look at this. I think, Beck, this is something that's come up time and time again in the Step 2 forum, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what we're seeing in some, especially forum members that have communities of practice, a number of them are actually taking back some control. So they'll have a decentralized model, but they might pick off, let's say, their core self-service task for, say, common HR information, and give that to specialist content writers within the team, and they're in charge of doing that. So it then says not all content's created equal. Yes, we do really appreciate our community of practice, but at the same time, we also recognize that some of that content we really need to get it 100% right if one of our strategies is to say all tier 0 HR questions are answered by the intranet. So that's something to keep in mind.
And that's where we talk about a kind of a graduated governance model. Yeah. Which says, some stuff, to Kai's message in the chat, we really do want to flag to people that this is poor quality because this is super important content. Other stuff, look, we know that IT can't spell. We're happy if they can talk. We just want the information to be correct, right? It doesn't need to be beautifully crafted. It just needs to be correct. So that graduated model, to Beck's point, just says not all content is of equal importance, and let's allocate finite time within an organisation to improve the most critical content.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's definitely the case, isn't it? The devolved publishing model was based on the fact that you give the information experts, the people who are experts in that field, access to publish, but that doesn't make them intranet experts in any way, shape or form. So I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, in the report we touch a little bit more on training for authors as well. We're going to just go to our last little poll in relation to accidentally experts. Yes. Accessibility. Sorry, accessibility. Sorry, I read. I misread that. I beg your pardon. Our last little poll is about how people access the intranet. So we are going to ask what percentage of people access the intranet via mobile devices? This one I think you might be surprised about, but it looks like everyone knows the answer. Everyone's done their research, read the report by the looks of it. So Fran, we'll go to the next. Everyone was right. It's actually from, people use their desktop to access the intranet. We found it was only 0.22% of employees who access the intranet via their phone, and then an incredibly small amount by tablets, 0.02% access them by tablets. This was from about 100,000 employees that we benchmarked. So that lends the question, do you even bother trying to make your intranet accessible from mobile devices? Rebecca, James, Sharon, what do you think?
Sharon, no, wrong question. Look, I'm very passionate about this. I started my life as a programmer doing on handheld devices about 30 years ago. No, look, so I think this comes back to that question of the purpose of the intranet. So if this is a corporate intranet for a government agency and no one is using on a mobile device, then, maybe I'm slightly sad in my heart that we were hoping that they would read the news on the bus or the train in, but at the end of the day, they're not, hey-ho. But, if the organisation is a council, and or hospital, and 2/3, 3/4 of staff do not have desks or dedicated computers, then this result is a crisis. This is an absolute fundamental failing in those environments, and that's where obviously you want the stats, right? There's the aggregate sort of benchmarking across organizations, which is fine. But, as a intranet manager, well, who are the population of your intranet users, and where do they need to get their information, and are we achieving that? And well, we're not, clearly. I mean, which does make me very sad.
I think there is an element of context to that, right, James? You're absolutely right. Yeah, different organisations will have different profiles, but I think part of this can be, we want to be careful that we don't drive that sort of vicious circle, that because we say everything's on desktop, therefore everyone designs for desktop, and then you automatically exclude mobile from those thinking. And I think there is a genuine desire. I think there are a lot of things that hamstring that, not just necessarily the intranet platform that you might be using, but a lot of cases it might be the systems that you then hand off to, your HR systems and the like. Some of those are particularly not mobile friendly from my experience. So yeah, I think this is one that will be interested to see how this tracks over time, and how when we start to sort of categorize different organizations, how this fits in. So I think I'm keen to see more mobile myself. But anyway, that lends us to the next slide, doesn't it? I think.
Well, I'm just going to answer Rebecca's question in here, saying, did any of the 7 organisations in the report have split workforces, operational versus office space? Yes, I can think so. They're anonymous in the report, although we can name one of them was Syngenta, which is the world's biggest agribusiness. So lots of labs, lots of literally farmers out in fields in that organisation, and they have, Kai, is this correct? I think there was about 40,000 employees there. It was another organisation, Agreco, which is all on site, like they do all the timing and power for things like Olympics, World Cups, those sorts of things. So lots of people out on the field actually from those 2 organisations.
Yeah.
Doesn't bode well.
No, well, look, that's right. I mean, and I think, to Matt's point, are we really delivering the value that we should be to these staff as well? It's one thing to say, oh, well, we've made, pages mobile, friendly, but if mobile friendly, 24-page policy, well, maybe not. And back sort of about 10, 15 years ago, when enterprise mobility became the thing, right? And finally, organizations that are going to be transformed by the enterprise application of things like the iPhone. And a lot of us, including me, very excited. What we looked at was, well, what do we mean enterprise mobility? Is it about just saying at the lowest level, hey, people can access intranet pages? Okay, well, maybe next level up, we should be designing things in a way that is better for mobile devices. But it's once you get to those higher levels where we say, well, actually, it's making use of the mobile device, the camera, the GPS. We're designing it for processes in the field. The activity side of things, Matt, that you touched upon, it's not just about the policy, it's about doing the task out in the mobile field. And look, sad to say, this is still not progressed all that far. I mean, we've seen amazing examples in the awards that we've run. We saw like Virgin Trains did a beautiful mobile solution that pocket content about how you deal with people throwing up on trains. And apparently you go to the teddy bear cupboard underneath the stairs and get out the sick powder, and you pour that on the vomit. And then there's a button at the bottom of this page that says notify someone. And at the next stop, so cleaners come in and clean the stuff. I mean, it's just beautiful things, a Stagecoach and what they've done. So I do think there's real opportunities for this. And hopefully these statistics are going to galvanize change, rather than reinforce the status quo, as you flag as being the danger, Matt.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, it's a really good example, and some work I did when I was and it goes back to that importance of strategy and understanding your audience, like Rebecca said, and I did some work at an organisation where we categorised them into archetypes around, like, well, what, if you've got knowledge workers, or you've got, customer service, or you've got, what is their level of mobility? What is that need for them to have mobile solutions, and what are the tasks that they particularly focus on? Because all of those things are different. So I think, again, as we aggregate things together, it can mask that there's going to be certain content, certain audiences that we would expect to have a much, and should be aiming to have a much higher mobility factors and scores coming through the stats.
Look, it's a huge topic. I mean, I'm delighted that we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm. So did you want to quickly, James, just talk to your 5 layers of enterprise mobile design?
I've probably touched upon enough of those.
We can answer more questions at the end if anyone wants to dive into it a little deeper.
Certainly, it'd be interesting, Sharon and Matt, and I guess Kai, to maybe collect some demographic information on the participants in the benchmarking, and then potentially split some of the results, compare and contrast, whether people with frontline staff, field staff, are doing things differently than others, because that might provide some really valuable context, particularly as the numbers of benchmarking participants grow.
Yeah, good point.
Challenge accepted for the May report.
I thought you would say that, Kai. Great.
So now we're going to hand over to Matt, and Matt's just going to really quickly walk you through SWOOP Analytics for SharePoint Intranet, with the purpose of how you can apply all this data and find out what it looks like in your organisation in real life.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I could talk about this for hours, so I would conscious of time. And I guess some of the key things that we've spoken about here, understanding what some of that activity is like over time. When we come into this, we have a intranet level, we can look down at sites and pages, or we can specify an audience by an attribute. So that's really handy if you want to look at a particular department or other attributes that you might have. So we can filter that down the scope. But then we spoke about some things around how do we help people govern their content. And this is why we've got the sort of essentials tab here, is to give people a really quick overview. Firstly, that the intranet is working, that we've got visitors. This is our own small SWOOP intranet, so hence not massive amount of numbers, but it gives us a very quick overview. It gives us the sort of typical time that they spend. And we can see sort of the daily visits and visitors over time, and how many out of the whole organisation are actually accessing. So we're below that target of 90% at the moment. We're at 81. So we can see those benchmarks real on the screen. We then come into the bit when we talk about how do we keep content in quality. So we've developed a health score which looks at quality, experience and engagement. So we're sort of factoring in quality things like spelling mistakes. We're factoring in whether the content has got broken links, whether it's getting old and out of date. In the experience, we're factoring in things like how short are the headings? Are there enough headings to the amount of text on a page? How readable is that text? Is it is it quite nicely and readable content, or is it complicated language and jargon? And all of those factors will influence what the experience score is. And then finally, the engagement score is made up of how much content have you got on a page, and how long are people actually spending on that page, and does that match up? So it's not just a case of, are people seeing the content, did they spend enough time to actually engage with it and take information away with them? So we score that, we aggregate that up to an intranet level in this case. We've got a list here of all the pages where there's things to fix. So you can see we've got sort of issues on some of these pages. I'll click through that in a second. And then we've just got a summary of the actual sort of top content that's coming through, just so we can see what people are looking at. If I dive into a page, it will start to show me a bit more detail about how those scores are changing over time. So you can see the engagement on this page is the thing that's fluctuating the most, which not surprising, it's based on visitors. But we can start to break out and see things like, okay, this has got lots of spelling mistakes and this has got broken links. So what's going on that page? And we can see below here what those broken links are. Now, this is good for me. We've got a lot of broken links here to our Confluence pages. We use Confluence in our business. The reason those pages break is because we have a proxy, we have a login. So there's a reason for that. So we understand that that's, whilst it's broken from a sort of detection point of view, it's not something that was necessarily impacting on experience. And we can pick up the spelling mistakes there too if we need to go and change them. So that gives you a really sort of quick summary, and you can see this is the quality starting to get old. It was last modified over 3 months ago, so we probably should go back not only to correct the spelling mistakes, but also just to make sure that everything is up to date. But the experience of that page is pretty good. We've got a reasonable readability score. There is a little bit of jargon on that page. It's our onboarding page. There's a few technical things we have to talk about. But we've got nice headings. We've got a nice ratio of paragraphs to headings. So the structure of that page is something that's quite nice. So straight away at a page level, I can take some insights away. I've got things that I can go and fix. I've got things that I can go and improve. I can start to plan actions based on all of those statistics. I'll jump back up to an intranet level quickly here. Again, I've got a list if I want to. If I'm at an intranet manager, I can see all the issues. I can see whether it's particularly spelling or content or what those things are. So I can get a really quick overview at an intranet level. Again, as James and Rebecca mentioned, you know, this is something that we can then use to support authors, those sorts of things in those different areas to improve their pages. We get some behavior insights. So this is where we've got things like the activity by time. So what time of day people are working. We've got things like who are the most frequent editors. What are they editing, the documents and the pages, and how many people they're reaching. So again, we can pick out who is that group of champions that we need to manage. I can start to understand a little bit more about our audiences. So, you know, which departments in this case are visiting the most across our intranet. If I click on these, it will take me into that detailed view of the audience, you know, what device they're using. So you can see I've now filtered it for head office. Jump back up at intranet level. We've got the device. We're rolling out imminently the browser. So are people using things like Teams to look at their intranet as opposed to using, you know, Chrome? We're picking those things up. And obviously for those global companies, we can actually understand a little bit more about the locations based on IP addresses. And then obviously we've got things like, you know, a full list of pages, their scores, all of that sort of stuff. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour. Hopefully you can see that there are things there that support those issues that we're trying to do. You know, really that focus on the health scores, the fixes, the quality helps to lift that governance into something that's a little bit more ongoing. You know, our ambition with this is to make sure that when people do these big intranet projects, that then they keep their intranets healthy rather than, you know, just having a regular cycle of intranet projects because everything's lapsed and you know, the experience drops. So that was me. I'll head back to the presentation.
So please, anyone put questions in the chat or jump in and ask questions. But Fran, have you got what are we? Oh, back over screens. I think we were just going through the key findings. So just this is more of a takeaway, and if you like, we can share these slides with you. Hopefully these just help reinforce, you know, how you might be able to make your intranet more engaging, to that comment that was in there earlier. So the prime time people read the intranet is between 7 and 9, and so before work and during lunch on a weekday. Thursday's slightly the better day. People spend about 17 minutes a day reading the intranet and about 10 minutes for news each day. Aim for intranet news articles to be 500 words or more, not less, surprisingly. Well, I thought it was surprising. Yeah, so we had lots of discussion about the devices to use, and people are mostly accessing the intranet from their laptop. And the last thing was, after about a week, you can expect news articles to start to decay. So then look at, archiving, whether it's 12 months or what's going to work with you guys. Matt, did you want to add to that?
No, that's
No,
perfect summary.
We'll move along.
Beautiful. So if you haven't already, I do encourage you to download the report. It's free. You can keep all of the insightful insights that happened today on your desktop, or maybe less than 1% of you would like it on your mobile. We have the QR code there. We'll also have a link in the chat ready for you guys to download that. Busy as ever. As Sharon mentioned before, we're already starting our next year's SharePoint Benchmarking Report. We'd love for you to participate. The cutoff is March 30th, 2024, so you have plenty of time to decide. Scan the QR code. There'll be another link in the chat, so we'd love to see you in participation for that report there. I'm going to hand over to James and Rebecca to talk about that DEX conference, DEX 2023 conference.
Yeah, look, just to say, in only about 2 weeks, we are running back to running our in-person conference, the by far the best conference of its type in the Southern Hemisphere, we think. So around intranets, but the broader digital workplace, digital literacy and digital workplace tools. So we've got a bunch of lovely international folks coming and some wonderful local speakers. So jump on board, not too late to join us at the conference and continue these conversations with the SWOOP folks who will be, in the audience. So there aren't any sponsors or vendors presenting, but there is lovely folk in the audience, and so you can chat with them in their lovely red shirts at the conference.
And there's a great lineup there. I'm just looking, James. You've got Jamie Stokes, who is one of the thought leaders in the benchmarking report, and Kim. Kim may even be on the call. If you are, Kim, hi. She's from NRMA and we've got some great case studies from Kim on Viva Engage mostly.
Yes, which is what she's talking about. So yes.
Oh, good. There you go.
And then if you wanted more than just a day of great stuff, over to you, Beck.
So I know we've got some Step 2 forum members on the call, so feel free to pick their brains. But this is our professional community of intranet and digital workplace managers and their teams. We have both online, monthly, sometimes more than one a month, sessions, as well as in-person events in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra. So get in touch if you'd like to hear more or get a free pass, or ask any of the members on the call.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And it is that time of year again. We are coming to the Viva Engage Benchmarking Report, which is available next month, which is shocking. It's like we're churning them out. If you would like to pre-register, we've got the QR code on the screen there. We'll have another link in the chat. On that webpage there, we've got some early insights. So I won't get too much into it, but it might surprise you. So go check out that webpage there and pre-register for the report. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming. We'll have some time for any questions if you'd like to stay around. But huge thank you to everyone on the call today. Thank you so much to James and Rebecca for joining us and having some very insightful discussions on today's session. Thank you, Matt and Sharon, for leading it. I really appreciate it. If you're heading off, thank you so much. Have a terrific rest of your day. If you'd like to stay around and chat, please do so. But thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
And I'm going to add a spoiler because I'm just looking at Fiona in there. One of the case studies that may or may not be in the Viva Engage benchmarking report is a great one about how to become an influencer in a month, based on a leader at a big bank. So awesome. Definitely worth downloading. Register for the Viva Engage benchmarking report with some great case studies in there.
And if anyone is here left, we got some people left in the call. If you have any specific questions to any of the participants today, now's the time to just unmute and make the best of a few minutes where we can maybe still hold them here.
If people want to chat about intranets, then Beck and I aren't going anywhere. We have an abnormal passion about this topic.
Oh, Fiona's got a question. Go, Fiona.
take myself off mute. Sorry, there's quite a bit
Yeah.
of noise in the background. James, firstly, I have to say, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for everybody who's been involved. It's really interesting from a comms perspective. All the things you kind of knew, but it's great to have them in one report. And something that I can share with my colleagues as well. But a question for you, James. You talked about intranets really needing to deliver value, and I completely agree with that. And, we don't just want to measure page views. How do we measure value? What are the sorts of things that you would say derive value or show value?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a bunch of different ways of doing it. I guess I would say that the general principle is the closer we are to supporting the operational and frontline aspects of an organization, the easier it is to demonstrate benefit. So, for example, if we're supporting a call center, then, well, actually, there are heaps of metrics that are already done around call handling time and customer satisfaction and, all of this sort of thing. Likewise in other sort of operational roles where we're kind of standing at a distance and sort of saying, how do we attribute, I don't know, $1 value to intranets? That's both hard and dangerous. Because, once we start talking about money saved on intranets, then, well, sack a lot of us, right? That's an easy way to save money. Makes it hard to get budget for your next project. But I guess the question, Fiona, for you is, with the Westpac intranet, to what degree? I mean, I know that there's a bunch of other things within the broader digital workplace that support frontline roles in terms of frontline knowledge bases. Where do you see the biggest opportunities to kind of really add value? Who are the key audiences you would love to better support?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, I'm putting you on the spot.
Interestingly, I think people always think that it's going to be frontline employees, but in fact, they have a really fabulous knowledge base that is just delivering for the sorts of things that they need. And there's been an awful lot of time invested in that knowledge base for them. I would actually say that it's in all employees to just self-serve that day-to-day stuff. And I think that that's where we're losing productivity, is that people can't find what they need. And they're just trawling through endless amounts of rubbish.
And to Beck's point earlier, that you could, for example, aim to reduce the number of phone calls to the HR service desk by providing better tier 0 content. But also just to round it out with just one other completely different direction. So we've worked with all of the big 4 banks at various points. And what's always amazed me is how reluctant people are to use the intranet to foster culture. Now you walk into a big bank foyer and it is festooned with all of the wonderful things the bank does out in the community and all of these things, heart-rending tales about adding value. Westpac obviously flying in with helicopters and saving people and stuff like this, right? But yeah, we go to the intranet and it's very dry, very official, or we don't do it with people. Now, there are staff engagement surveys conducted in all big organizations. And could we look to meaningfully shift the dial on that with the intranet? Yeah. And that's not going to make you money or save you money, but is there business value in that? Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of different directions you can go depending on where you sit in the organization. But I noticed someone else has got their hand
Shannon, that was Shannon.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for running such a great session today. One of the things that sort of really piqued my interest is around, you mentioned community of practice for authors, because I'm in a situation where we've got an intranet, majority of the content's essentially being managed by volunteers. It's something that's on top of people's day jobs. They've got publishing permissions, but it's something they just jump in there, get it done, and then get out again, and with varying degrees of success, in my opinion. Is there any top tips sort of key things that you'd recommend about fostering a community of best practice when you're trying to engage that authoring community?
Oh, this is a big thing for sure.
Look, there is. I'll try. There's lots. I think it comes back to for me, one of the most successful communities I ran with really time poor people was selling the fact that I was giving them skills that they could use in other organizations. Now, you're probably not going to advertise that outside of the smaller group, but it's helping them understand the value. And I think it comes back to what the content is, who's using it, and helping them also understand that it doesn't have to be a massive ask for them. We talked before about making your pages pretty, helping them understand that actually they're probably better using some standard templates, giving them some great writing for the web training that they can then use, and getting their focus on the content that really, once they've written it once, that review cycle is much quicker and much simpler. That's a snapshot. I could talk on this one for hours. So,
I mean, the other thing I'd just say on this is it is about fostering a sense of community, so that you don't have to support one-on-one to everyone, where there is that sense of peer support around delivering stuff to the intranet, and that's there's so many ways in which we can add value to folks. I mean, people want to do a good job in everything they do, including publishing to the intranet. If to Beck's point, if we can make it easy for them to do a good job, they're going to be pretty happy with that, within the limits of how much time that they've got.
Yeah, I've got a little note just about recognition, Shannon. Anyway, that's a little badge on their profile through, or a little annual awards thing that says these are the people that produce really good content, so people can see that there is that wider peer-to-peer recognition. I think is huge.
That's the kind of some of the 7 deadly sins in action here, right? So it's greed. Hey, I want the trophy. Or sloth. Oh, just make it easy for me. Or this envy. Oh, look at the finance department section. They've redone it. Theirs looks so much better when it was highlighted at a community of practice meeting. So anyway, yes, I'll leave it at that.
Great, no, thank you.
Beautiful. Do we have any other questions? If not, feel free to get in contact with us later. Maybe we can continue this discussion. I'll be sending out the recording and slides, everyone, so no worries on that one. But thank you so much for joining, and have a lovely day.
Thank you all. See you later.
Thank you, James and Rebecca.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, James.
Bye
Thanks,
for now.
Rebecca.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.